será vencido.
The people united will never be defeated.
El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. El pueblo unido jamás será vencido. Thank you, Boom Shake. Fantastic. We are planning to segue into the main press conference with a beautiful song, Justice, by Arne in Los Angeles with the Poor People's Campaign. Can we still do that? We're running a little late, or do you want to just go right in? We'll do it? Okay, so you're welcome to join in. Let's go ahead and play Justice by Arne. This is just written.
So the song is very simple. It just says this: Justice, 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 justice. Oh, let it be so. Justice, 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 justice. Oh, let it be so. Justice. And then it moves to the verses. Justice to cleanse the soul. Justice to make us whole. Let it be so. Justice. Justice must overflow. Justice where it is owed. Let it be so. Justice. And then we just sing justice. Justice, 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 justice. Oh, let it be so. Justice. And it's a marching song. It's a song to march to. Justice, 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 justice. Oh, let it be so. Justice, justice, justice.
Thank you, Arne. Beautiful for you to be here in spirit. Wish you could be here in person. So I'll speak up and maybe, yeah, that works. Good idea. I'm glad I have a lot of people here helping me because we may need it to get through this. Beautiful. You can see after a year I'm very practiced at this. Yeah. So this is a news conference today to focus on House Resolution 438, which introduces the third reconstruction, which is a comprehensive recitation of the issues that need to be addressed and a careful litany of the necessary remedies. Before we get started, we're going to have a reflection and benediction by Minister Sherry. Invocation. Thank you. And just a couple of notes. First of all, we are going to observe social distancing. I think we're doing pretty well so far for an outdoor event, maybe just a little bit of spacing. I know many are vaccinated, but many are still not. And so we recommend masks on unless you're speaking at the microphone, in which case I think it's perfectly appropriate to remove the mask for that event. So please do. And for media who are here, all the speakers will be available for interviews after the prepared remarks. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Minister Sherry, who is a social justice minister affiliated with Heart and Soul Center at Light Center for Spiritual Living, and that's in Oakland. She's a longtime Oakland resident and also works with the East Bay Alliance for a sustainable economy. So for our indication, Minister Sherry, thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Good morning, everyone. So I'm just honored to be here for our opening prayer. So I'm going to invite you to allow yourself to take a deep breath together. Just being fully present in this moment, allowing yourself just to anchor in the precious space and time of right now. As we focus on our breath, just allow us to be a symbol which speaks to the essence of one life. The source of all life that is just breathing on us right now. It is the source creating an invitation for a life despite the color of one's skin, or housing situation, or whether or not anyone has health insurance. It requires that it rebukes that there are 140 million people who are poor. It mourns around the idea that there are so many who are just one emergency away from economic ruin. This one God stands with us in our collective grief that is turned into a collective determination to insist the violence of poverty and systemic racism, that it stops today. That all, senseless suffering stops today. Knowing there is nothing that separates us from the love of God. Thank you so much. And then there was spirit. Thank you. So knowing there is nothing that separates us from the love of God, no forms of violence caused by interlocking oppressions and poverty, racial hierarchy, that it's from this place that we affirm the third Reconstruction. I'm sorry. You know, I've been preaching for a long time. This is the first time. I think I got too excited by the boom shake. So just in this moment right now, we affirm that the third Reconstruction resolution that fully addresses poverty and low wages from the bottom up. That we call this resolution the disruption of the status quo, the divine shifter. That we are Oakland, standing with a high resolve to revive our commitment to implement moral laws and policies that can heal and transform the nation. That we allow tears, our joys, every feeling that we experience to guide us, to hit us, to lead us toward that divine high resolve. And like my ancestors who walked together, following the North Star, which provided them light, leading them out of the wilderness of conditions of racial and economic violence, we too, with a campaign that will lead, love this nation where humanity is held sacred, communities are free from poverty and interlocking oppressions. So we give thanks today. We give thanks that today is a new day and that we are ready to respond in a new way. That we stand on behalf of this revolution, of this resolution. In confidence, we turn to divine love as it guides us. A divine love which calls us to look, to notice, to not turn away from what's happening to God's people, so that we in Oakland are forever changed. Amen.
Thank you, Minister Sherry. We need that reminder all the time. So as we begin the program, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm David White. I'm a member of the California Coordinating Committee and a member of the Bay Area Regional Steering Committee. The Poor People's Campaign is actually a revival of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign that he began right before he was killed. At that time, he began to recognize and to begin to state very clearly that there are interlocking injustices with racism, that's systemic racism, and widespread poverty and the war economy. Now, since that time, with the revival of the Poor People's Campaign, we see 5 interlocking injustices. Certainly widespread poverty, systemic racism, the war economy, ecological devastation, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. And so that's what we are dedicated to confronting and to fighting, and that's definitely a part of this Resolution 438, which is dedicated to ending poverty and lifting from the bottom up. So, as a part of this campaign, we want to take a look at 4 aspects today in terms of supporting the resolution ending poverty. First of all, we want to focus on the fundamental issues and problems that are endemic in terms of poverty in this country. We want to highlight the need and the value of this resolution. Second, we're here to hear the voices of those who are most directly impacted by widespread poverty. Because as we talk about huge numbers and the extent of poverty in this country, it's fundamental that we remember
that this is very personal. This is a neighbor, this is a family, this is people in our community that are terribly impacted by the issues of poverty. And so we lift up the voices of those who are most directly impacted. We will hear from people today who can tell us personally the experiences that they've confronted in their own lives. Third, we want to acknowledge Representative Barbara Lee. We are at her district office today, and we want to acknowledge her leadership in terms of developing this resolution and working very closely with the concepts and ideas and advocacy of the National Poor People's Campaign, and in sponsoring this legislation, introducing it into Congress, and developing 30 co-sponsors so far. As it happens, we have 2 others in the Bay Area who are co-sponsors. One is Representative Ro Khanna, and the other is Mark DeSaulnier. And so that's a good start. That's a beginning and a way to grow. And so we look forward to working in tandem with Representative Lee to develop the full support of the entire Congress. And that's our 4th point, is that today we are urging all congressional members to look at it carefully, to study it, to understand what it says, to co-sponsor it, to vote for it, and after it's voted for, get busy. Because when you read the mandates in this resolution, it's a lot of work, and they better get going soon. So that's what we're here for today. So with that, I want to move along because basically, when you look at how serious this really is, what we're talking about is a fundamental need to change public policy. I mean, that's what we're talking about, to transform the way it has been and to make it in something entirely differently. And let me give you some just concrete examples. You'll recognize them in a way. They're obvious. But it's like, you know, with billions of dollars spent on the medical industry, you know, while millions of families don't have access to medical help in an emergency, you know, at least not without financial ruin. You know, that's public policy. And when there's a schoolhouse in every prosperous neighborhood, and when millions of our kids are basically denied an adequate education, and you know, when that denial means a lifetime of poverty, deprivation, and increased incarceration, you know, that's public policy. You know, we have thousands of men, women, and children in Oakland who are wandering the streets by day, you know, looking for a safe sidewalk to lie down on for a while. And that's public policy. And when we have expendable workers who suddenly became essential workers during the pandemic, working at greater risk, working at less than a living wage, and soon to be expendable again, that's public policy. That's what I'm talking about. And so with that, what I would like to do is to invite our first testifier to tell us her own personal experience with what she has dealt with in her own life. And I'm talking about Carol Crooks. She's a co-convener for the Berkeley East Bay Gray Panthers, a part of the 1,000 Grandmothers movement, and she's active with the steering committee, the Bay Area region of the Poor People's Campaign. And she's today here to testify about the profound impact that she's experienced. Thank you, Carol.
Hello, my name is Carol Crooks. I've lived in the East Bay since the early 1970s. I'm here to speak in support of the third Reconstruction Resolution sponsored by my Congresswoman Barbara Lee because it calls for policies and legislation that will 1. Enact living wages and protect the right to form and join unions. 2. Provide universal single-payer health care and guarantee that everybody has the right to housing, welfare, water, and equitable, diverse public education. 3. Expand and protect our voting rights and save our democracy. 4. Embrace a climate agenda that prioritizes the poor and those hit first and worst by climate disaster. 5. Redirect military spending. Implement fair taxes and break free from decades of trickle-down economics by being willing to spend resources on those programs of social uplift and other humane policies. In the middle of the 1990s, I found myself homeless. The part that was really unexpected that took me by storm was when it took so long to move forward from where I started. It's taking me years to get where I am now. Now I'm in good shape. I have Section 8. I'm enrolled in other programs, and we had help during coronavirus. I've actually paid off bills and even been able to buy some books, which I dearly love. Starting out, I did without furniture. I did without a lot of things. And I didn't know how to get past the fear and the pain of not being able to take good care of myself and not being able to meet other people. I clutched, was at a loss for words because I was afraid other people may feel bad about how I was doing. I felt like I should be doing better, and it was very slow. You don't get a lot of money on Social Security, and even now, all it would take for me to be in trouble would be to have to move. My landlord wanted to sell the property before the pandemic, before the prices went up on construction and the real estate prices went down. They wanted to sell the property I live in. So I could go out, it could go out from under me because the highest percentage of people that are going homeless these days are age 50 and up. And I'm 73. It would be very hard for me to move even under optimal conditions. And it's hard to save money because you can only have $2,000 in assets with Social Security. And my landlord won't give my deposit back. I've already been told that. I'm pretty good at knowing what my limits are, but I don't know how I deal with having to move. I can try to get on a housing list for different buildings that have senior apartments. I was on one list and my name came up, but I wasn't ready to move, so I got taken off the list and can't reapply for that building. I haven't applied for more places for 2 reasons. One is that could happen again, and the other is that we had the pandemic. And so I've just not been thinking about it. I've just decided to trust that things will be okay and that I don't have to go through what I went through 25 years ago. But there are times that I think about it and then it scares me, and that's where I am right now. Financially, it's advantageous to real estate companies that own retirement homes to put old folks there, but it's far more expensive than having people live at home, and it's dangerous. I want to stay in my own home. During the pandemic, a lot of people in nursing homes died. Hard to social distance, staff didn't have PPE, and they think we're expendable. That's one of the reasons I'm here today speaking in support of the third Reconstruction Resolution, which calls for policies and legislation that will guarantee housing for everyone. 140 million people are one $400 emergency away from poverty. We need policies that are people-friendly in this country. We need a society where you can be human, make a mistake, without falling into poverty. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises.
Carol, don't go too far away. I want to thank you for that. And so much of what you described was really structural. It was really impossible for you to do anything other than what you did. What I'm wondering is in your circumstance, so many people feel like it's their fault and feel like it's something they've done wrong. And what I'm wondering is, did you go through that early on when you were first homeless and stuff? Was that something that you experienced in your own life? Yeah. I appreciate you sharing this today. We all do. Next, we're going to have a reading of an excerpt from the... Beautiful. So next we're going to have a reading of an excerpt from the resolution, and please step forward. Your name?
Wilson Riles.
Thank you so much. Good to see you today.
Housing. We need a third reconstruction to revive our political commitment to moral laws and policies that can heal and transform the nation. Whereas there are 30 to 40 million people at risk of homelessness, whereas only 1/4 of eligible families receive federal housing assistance, whereas household debt burdens have grown to staggering levels, and half our families find it hard to pay for usual household expenses. We must now heal the nation by guaranteeing safe and quality housing for all, ending all evictions and canceling past due rent and mortgage payments, expanding the stock of good quality affordable housing, and providing public housing and rental assistance rather than expanding the shelter system. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises.
Amen. Amen. So earlier I mentioned that one of the aspects today is to acknowledge the leadership of Representative Barbara Lee, who's been instrumental in getting this introduced into Congress, and to taking the congressional leadership on this initiative. What I'd like to do next is to call up Alex Katz. He is the district communications manager. Yes, sir. And I'm calling him up because we want to express our appreciation to Representative Lee for her leadership in this. And I think, Randy, you have a little something to share for on behalf of the Poor People's Campaign for Barbara Lee. Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you. Alex, on behalf of the Poor People's Campaign, I'd like to present this banner. Let's see. I'd like to present this banner on behalf of the Poor People's Campaign that's been signed by the participants here at the press conference today. Thank you. And I would also like to present Representative Barbara Lee with a Poor People's Campaign t-shirt in size medium.
Thank you very much.
Hold it again. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. Can you tell?
Who's next so I can get the height right?
Oh, that's.
Never. Sorry. Turn it off. I'm not using it. Sorry.
So, in introducing the next person to provide remarks, I want to mention one thing about Representative Barbara Lee, and that is that in 2002, she received the Sean McBride Peace Prize, and it was clear that it had an awful lot to do with the fact that she was the only person to ever vote against the war in Afghanistan. Now, Sean McBride, you may not all recall, was an Irishman who began his life fighting British occupation, served in the Irish Republic government for a long time in various roles, was a co-founder of Amnesty International, and spent much of his later life fighting constantly on behalf of world peace and a nuclear-free world. Now, the reason I mention that is we actually have two recipients of the Sean McBride Peace Prize today, and the Jackie Cabasso is our next speaker, who also received the Sean McBride Peace Prize in Copenhagen in 2008. And that was for her dedication throughout her entire life. She's been working day and night for a nuclear-free world for about 35 years. And I probably miscounted it. She can tell me it was probably a little bit longer than that. This was a very poor career choice on her part. I think she would tell us that. But we're grateful to her for her continued dedication to this. And with that, I'd like to introduce Jackie Cabasso.
Thank you, David. Thanks, everybody. So I'm based in Oakland. I'm the child of an immigrant, and I've been a full-time activist for more like 40 years. My focus has been mainly on nuclear disarmament, opposing wars and militarism, and promoting peace. I've had the privilege of speaking at rallies and conferences around the world, including at the United Nations. So why am I here today? Well, about 35 miles from here is the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Laboratory, one of two labs that design and develop all U.S. nuclear warheads. Every year, to commemorate the August anniversaries of the 1945 U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we organize rallies, marches, and nonviolent actions at the lab to protest ongoing U.S. preparations to use again the deadliest form of weaponry ever devised. I've been arrested symbolically blocking the gates to the lab at least 30 times. This preparation to wage nuclear war isn't to protect ordinary people like us. It's to protect the corporations, the wealthiest, and the most powerful interests. As low-wage workers fight for a living wage, working during a pandemic under especially dangerous conditions, the U.S. government is planning to spend some $2 trillion over the next 30 years to maintain and modernize its apocalyptic nuclear arsenal. This isn't just a matter of guns versus butter, it's immoral. At the height of the pandemic, even though I'm a vegetarian, I participated in actions to support local low-wage McDonald's workers who were being denied proper PPE and sick pay. During those demonstrations, I realized that I felt exactly the same way I feel when I'm protesting at the Livermore lab. It's because we're fighting against the same forces of state violence, power, greed, racism, and injustice toward the same end, a more peaceful, just, sustainable, and inclusive world. From the early 2000s until we were stopped by the pandemic, my organization, Western States Legal Foundation, organized annual public participatory readings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s prophetic speech, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break Silence, delivered on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year before his tragic assassination. In that speech, Dr. King declared, "I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government." He went on, "I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. When machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people, the giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered." The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has picked up Dr. King's unfinished work, weaving together the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, systemic poverty, environmental devastation, militarism and the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism in one moral fusion campaign. I celebrate my representative, Barbara Lee's decades of leadership on issues of peace and justice. And I'm proud that she is the lead sponsor of HRES 438, Third Reconstruction, fully addressing poverty and low wages from the bottom up, which comprehensively encompasses the Poor People's Campaign Moral Jubilee platform. Here's part of what it says about demilitarizing United States foreign policy, borders, and policing. There are over 140 million people who are poor, low wealth, or just one emergency away from economic ruin in the United States. But 53 cents of every federal discretionary dollar goes to the Pentagon, while only 15 cents go toward anti-poverty programs. The United States, since 2001, wars by the United States have killed more than 800,000 people and displaced 37 million more. Of the 19 million veterans in the nation, 5.4 million are on disability, nearly 38,000 are homeless, and many military families and veterans are on food assistance. Local and state enforcement agencies have received over $7.4 billion worth of equipment from the Department of Defense since 1990. And experts have identified up to $350 billion in defense spending cuts that would save resources and keep the country safe and secure. We now must heal the nation by demilitarizing U.S. foreign policy, borders, and policing, including by cutting military spending by at least 10%, ending forever wars, repealing existing authorizations of use of military force, restoring Congress's war powers, pursuing diplomacy over war, moving toward nuclear disarmament, and curtailing the use of broad economic sanctions that create mass suffering, repealing programs that provide military equipment and training to domestic law enforcement agencies, and redirecting these resources to fully address systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and militarism. A radical revolution of values is not an option, it's an imperative. If we work together, we can achieve it. And as we like to say in the Poor People's Campaign, forward together, not one step back.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie. Have any of you all ever seen an aircraft carrier? Those things are ridiculous. And we happen to have, this country happens to have, more aircraft carriers than all the other countries in the world combined. So it's no wonder that those who claim to be cost conscious think that perhaps we don't have enough money for education. With that, I'd like to call up, I believe it's Stacy, is going to read a segment from the resolution.
On education, we need a third reconstruction to revive our political commitment to moral laws and policies that can heal and transform the nation. Whereas systemic racism takes the form of laws and policies that target people of color, especially poor people of color, to create and deepen inequalities in education, we must now heal the nation by guaranteeing diverse, safe, high-quality, equitable public education, guaranteeing accessible education infrastructure from pre-K-12 for all children, ensuring that higher education is free to everyone who wants to attend, protecting and expanding public resources for students with disabilities, and enacting relief from student debt. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises.
Thank you, Stacy. Next, we're going to hear further testimony. This will be from Minister Sherry, and I would really appreciate her telling her personal story. Thank you.
Thank you, David. My throat is ready. The heart and throat had to get together and have a conversation. So again, my name is Minister Sherry Murphy. I'm with the Faith Alliance for Faith Alliance for More Economy. I used to be a Lyft driver. In the past 3 years, from 2017 to 2020, Lyft had been my primary source of income. I had driven over 12,000 miles. Since the recession of 2008, as a Black queer woman, I know firsthand how important it is to have job benefits and labor protections in place. The COVID-19 pandemic has made it abundantly clear we have been fed the lie of scarcity, and the only scarcity we have is the anemic racial and economic conscience from corporations like Lyft and Uber. We are gathered today to call for a radical uprising of racial, economic, and political power. I say that because I know what it's like to work long hours with no guaranteed wages, no work breaks, no restrooms, no facilities, no overtime. I know what it's like to always have the looming threat of an accident with no coverage, a deactivation based on discrimination or retaliation with no protections, no remedies, and no voice. See, I know what it's like to be misclassified and having to struggle for 3 months to get unemployment in the middle of a pandemic. I know what it's like to experience lip service in support of Black lives, complete hollow words hiding behind billboard signs and big checks created by well-paid public relations teams, and absent of any promise of real change. Having corporations threaten to shut down their businesses because they can't get what they want. There are stories of drivers who have lost their lives, yet our companies once again just were nowhere to be found. There are stories of drivers who have been exposed to COVID-19, yet too afraid to stop working for fear of financial ruin. See, I know they wrote California Proposition 22 to circumvent the law that cheats workers. That PRO Act is the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. It was passed in the House and is headed for the Senate. And like the third Reconstruction, it will demand to end austerity and trickle-down economics that will lead toward good policy. See, this resolution is important. It will reflect faith values of racial equity, prevention of harm, and responsibility to the most vulnerable. Make no mistake that today is about a true democracy. It is no accident that 60% of the workers are immigrants and over 70% are black and brown workers who struggle to make ends meet, who are working full time and yet sleeping in their cars, or they can't afford child care or health care benefits. You see, it's time for a democracy that is all for all workers, regardless of whether they are sitting behind a desk or a wheel, regardless of their race, citizenship status, sexual orientation, or gender. It is time no worker, their family, their community is left behind. It is time that we act like we know that economic justice is racial justice. It is time. It is time. It is time. Amen. Okay.
Thank you, Sherry. One of the most insidious aspects of our economy is job insecurity. And I'd like to ask Kim to come up and to read a fundamental proposal concerning employment. Thank you.
I'm really grateful to be here, and I'm grateful for every person that is here today. I've been waiting for this. I just wanted to say that.
Amen.
This is the jobs guarantee. We need a third Reconstruction to revive our political commitment to moral laws and policies that can heal and transform the nation. Whereas nearly 50 million people are working for low wages, whereas more than 25 million workers have been directly hurt by the economic impacts of the pandemic, and more than half of the low-wage jobs that were lost have not returned. Whereas alongside mounting poverty, low wealth, debt, and economic desperation, poor communities and poor communities of color are hit first and worst by climate change, pollution, extreme weather, climate disaster, ecological devastation, and related health disparities, including during the COVID-19 pandemic. We must now heal the nation by implementing a federal jobs guarantee to increase public investments and infrastructure in poor and low-income communities that prioritize green and socially beneficial industries, public health, public education, care work, public transit and roads, public utilities, broadband, sanitation and water services, climate resilience, sustainable food production and distribution, libraries, fire stations, and cultural work. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Thank you.
Is it not working at all now? Showing the lights on. Oh, strange. Now it's working.
Beautiful. We have a beautiful benediction coming from Reverend Dr. Monica Cross. Before we do, a couple of quick announcements. The next thing coming with the Poor People's Campaign is a major mass assembly on June 21st. This is going to be massive across the country. We had one last year that had 2.5 million online live stream, and so look for that, because this should be major, and it will be in preparation for what happens next summer, when the entire Poor People's Campaign will be going to Washington, D.C. to be on the Mall, and it could well be the largest gathering there since 1963, when Martin Luther King had the March on Washington. So with that, I would like to invite Reverend Dr. Monica Cross for the benediction. Before I do want to let you know that she's the pastor of the First Christian Church of Oakland, minister of the women's ministries for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ for the Northern California and Nevada region of the Women's Council. She is very active with the Laney College Teach-In, the Poor People's Campaign, and a member of the Prophetic Council of the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you.
Oh, let me do this real quick. Could you hold this up? Could you hold that for a minute? Yeah, I need to do this. It gets in my... Okay. So, David, and once again, thank you everyone for coming out today, because the other side is doing some really evil stuff. Because it works for them. They make money for them, and their whole criteria for success for a good country is the stock market. So as long as their stocks are high, as long as even their 401k, forgive me for saying that, is doing good, they all right. They can walk right past a homeless person saying, that's your fault that you're homeless. That's your fault you're in poverty. Meanwhile, they support policies that make more and more and more poor people. Even just to get health care passed, the little that it is, even that was tough because we can't make any money. And so I'm glad that we're out here today making a difference. And we're not the only ones, thank God. There are people across the nation standing tall with us to make our voices heard, because you know what? The God I serve, whether you be Buddhist or Islam, whatever your faith tradition, they're all rooted in justice. Nobody should starve. You shouldn't. They say, well, you live in the richest country in the world. It's probably the most immoral country in the world, because the systems don't care about the poor. And in my tradition, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, General Minister and President Terry Hort Owens says, the disciples of Christ are fully on board and committed to the work of the Poor People's Campaign, and in particular the Third Reconstruction. Because the Third Reconstruction is about justice. As everybody has said, the Third Reconstruction is about reconstructing, and I will say reimagining, a society where all people benefit, where no one goes hungry, where no one is homeless, where everybody and every person is treated as a child of God. And unfortunately, many people don't feel like many of us are created like in God's image. That's actually what people think. So be aware of that. And that's not a religious statement. That's just a fact. This country is found in slavery, exploitation. And it's trying to hold on to that by suppressing voting rights. And so we're called together because of injustice. We're called together because somebody said the rent's too damn high. You know, David, I'm a veteran, and I was on an aircraft carrier. And they are huge. I was on Dwight D. Eisenhower. It cost billions and billions and billions of dollars. No matter how many miles could be fed, how many houses could be built by one carrier, one budget for a carrier. But they don't care about that. And so I just want to say thank you, everybody, for standing tall and standing up and making your voice heard, because for us today and generations to come, the voices will be heard. And finally, please don't get frustrated, because this is the third Reconstruction. Right? The first one was what? The Civil War. Of course, they assassinated Reconstruction after the Civil War. The second one was the Civil Rights Movement, of which we all benefit from. And now we're on the third one. So you got to hang in there. It's a generational fight. It's a generational struggle. And so as we end this wonderful, necessary call for justice for 140 million poor and low-wage folks, who many of them are veterans, by the way, who gave their lives for this country, know that the God of all that is good and just and right and life-giving calls us to this work, has ordained this work, because this work is sacred. Amen.
Amen. We are closing as we begin with some music.
I want to call up Boom. Hello, can you hear me? Is it okay? I want to call back Boom Shake, and I would like to ask Wilson Riles to come up here with that sign. I know you're famous without the sign, but we need that sign. All right, turn the sign towards people. Martin Luther King called on us to be an unsettling force, and we are going to rise, and we are now going to sing together, and the words are pretty much right on here on Mr. Riles' sign. Okay, so here comes the audio from one of the Poor People's Campaign choirs back east someplace, I think. You just chime in. Everybody just join in. First, she's going to teach you the melody and the words. Real quick.
We got nothing to lose. We are a new unsettling force. You say that?
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are powerful.
And we are powerful.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
And we are here.
And we are here.
We are a new unsettling force.
We are a new unsettling force.
For liberation.
For liberation.
And we got nothing to lose.
And we got nothing to lose.
But our chains.
But our chains.
We are a new unsettling force, and we are powerful, a new unsettling